Okay, let's unpack this. We are back for another deep dive, and today, honestly, I feel like we need to take a deep breath before we even start.
I agree completely. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. We are looking at a topic, or rather, a person who is just so massive in the cultural consciousness that it feels a bit like trying to explain gravity, you know?
Yeah.
You don't really explain it, you just sort of experience it.
It's a heavy topic, isn't it? But not heavy in a somber way, heavy in terms of pure significance. We are looking at a figure who has arguably redefined the physics of his sport.
We are talking about Lionel Messi. And look, I know what you're thinking out there. You're thinking, I know Messi. He's the guy on the video game cover. He's the guy hoisting the World Cup. But today, we are doing something entirely different.
Very different.
We aren't just going to list off match results or argue about who is the greatest of all time. That's for Twitter debates. We are building this deep dive on a specific, deeply researched biographical account of his personal life and his history.
Right. Because the mission here is to move way beyond the highlight reels. We want to look at the actual mechanics of the miracle.
The mechanics of the miracle. I love that phrasing.
Well, think about it. How do you go from a medical diagnosis at age 11 that almost ended your career before it even began? I mean, literally, a diagnosis that basically said, you will not grow.
Yeah.
How do you go from that to becoming statistically the greatest player in specific calendar years?
That is the part that gets me every time I look at the notes, the stats we have in front of us, and we are going to get into this later, but we are going to talk about the year he scored 91 goals. 91.
It's staggering.
It doesn't even sound real. It sounds like a glitch in the simulation. 91 goals in a single calendar year.
It is an absolute absurdity, statistically speaking. But to understand those 91 goals, you have to understand the growth hormone deficiency first. We really have to unpack the nature versus nurture aspect of his development.
Right, because talent alone doesn't explain it.
Exactly. We need to look at the biology, the economics, and the psychology of a child who had to leave his home continent just to chase a ball.
So whether you are a die-hard sports fan who thinks they know the whole story inside and out, or you're just someone curious about what high performance looks like when it's pushed to the absolute limit, stick around. We are going to uncover the resilience behind the talent.
Shall we go back to the very beginning?
Let's do it. Let's unpack the origins in Rosario, because every superhero needs an origin story, and this one starts in a pretty specific setting.
It does. The story begins on June 24th, 1987. That is the date Lionel Messi was born. The location is Rosario, Argentina. Now, if you want to understand Messi, you really have to understand Rosario.
Paint that picture for us.
Well, it's a port city. It's highly industrial. It has grit, and it is absolutely obsessed with football. But the Messi household specifically, this wasn't a story of born privilege by any stretch.
No, not at all. The source material paints a very grounded picture here. His father, Jorge Messi, was a steel factory manager, and his mother, Celia Maria Cuccittini, worked as a part-time cleaner.
Exactly. This is the definition of the working class. A steel factory manager isn't sitting in a plush CEO office. He's the guy on the floor making sure the shift actually runs. And his mother cleaning houses, it grounds the narrative immediately.
It really does.
This is a family that intimately understands the value of hard labor. They are working hard just to keep the lights on and keep food on the table for their kids.
It creates such a stark contrast, doesn't it? Because you think of Messi now, the global brand, the private jets, the sheer luxury of his life, but the roots are firmly planted in the dust and the steel of Rosario. It really highlights how far the trajectory actually went.
It does, and the football started almost immediately. According to our biographical source, he started playing for a local club called Grandoli at the age of 5.
5 years old. I mean, most 5-year-olds are still figuring out which foot is left and which is right. They were just running in a clump on the field.
True, but here is the specific detail that really jumped out. He was coached by his father.
Yeah, let's talk about that father-coach dynamic.
That is a fascinating dynamic to consider when we look at high achievers. We see this often, don't we? A parent who is deeply, deeply involved in the early technical development.
Right. You think of the Williams sisters in tennis with Richard Williams, or Tiger Woods with Earl Woods.
Exactly. It's a very common thread in these stories of absolute global dominance.
But do you think that adds pressure? I mean, put yourself in his shoes. You're 5 years old. Your dad is the coach yelling from the sidelines. You go home. He's still your dad. Does the coaching stop at the dinner table?
That is the million-dollar question. And it's usually a double-edged sword. On one hand, you have a support system that is fully, unequivocally invested in your success. Your coach isn't just a clocking-in employee looking at his watch. He's your father. He cares about your development more than anyone else in the world.
But the downside?
The downside is that the lines between home life and performance get blurred very, very early. It suggests that from a young age, football wasn't just a fun weekend hobby for Messi. It was the fundamental family language. It was literally how they related to one another.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's another family figure we have to mention here, right? Because the source briefly touches on her influence, and it's quite moving. The grandmother.
Yes, his grandmother, Celia. She was actually the one who first took him to the pitch. The story from the biography goes that the coach at Grandoli, not his father at this specific moment, but the head coach of the club, said he was too small to play. He looked at him and said, no, he was just tiny.
But the grandmother wasn't having it.
Not at all. She insisted. She stood there and said, put him on. And eventually, just to appease her, the coach caved.
And he went out and completely destroyed everyone on the pitch.
Precisely. And that's why, to this very day, whenever Messi scores a goal, you see him do the same celebration. He points 2 fingers to the sky. He's acknowledging his grandmother. She passed away before she could see the global success he achieved. So every goal is a tribute to the woman who demanded he be put on the field.
That gives me chills. Seriously. So he's clearly got the goods from day one. By age 8, he moves to Newell's Old Boys. And that's a significant step up because Newell's is a legendary club in Argentina.
It is a massive institution. He joined what they called the Machine of '87, which was the youth team named after their birth year. They were practically unbeaten. He was a recognized prodigy locally. But then we hit the wall, the inciting incident that defines the rest of his story.
Right. This takes us to section 2, the medical hurdle. This is where the story abruptly shifts from a fun tale about a talented kid to a story of sheer survival.
At age 11, Messi was diagnosed with a growth hormone deficiency.
Okay, let's pause and really unpack this. Growth hormone deficiency. I think people hear that phrase and they just think, oh, so he was just short, he needed to grow a bit. But it's much more complex than that, isn't it?
Much more complex. This is a serious medical condition where the pituitary gland isn't producing enough somatotropin. For a kid who wants to be a professional athlete, this isn't just a minor setback or a cosmetic issue. It is an existential threat to his entire future.
Because it affects more than height?
Exactly. It affects bone density, it affects muscle mass, and crucially, it affects the body's ability to repair itself after exertion. Without the proper treatment, he wouldn't just be short, he would be physically fragile. He simply wouldn't have the frame or the durability to survive competing with professional athletes.
So, practically speaking, what did this treatment actually look like? Was it just taking a pill with breakfast?
No, and this is where the sheer discipline of this child comes in. It required daily subcutaneous injections.
Daily injections.
Every single night. Imagine being an 11-year-old boy. You want to go to sleepovers, you want to hang out, you want to play video games. But every single night, you have to sit down, prepare a medical needle, and inject it directly into your own leg. Sometimes one leg, sometimes the other, rotating them. It's a level of responsibility, routine, and pain tolerance that most kids simply don't have to deal with.
That is wild to think about. It really reframes his entire character for me. We are so used to seeing him as this untouchable magician with the ball floating past players. But underneath that magic, there is a kid who had to endure a daily medical procedure just to have a baseline chance at a normal physical life.
Exactly. It builds a very specific kind of mental toughness early on. But our source material highlights a brutal reality here. It wasn't just the physical diagnosis that was the problem, it was the cost.
The financial barrier. This is where the socioeconomic reality crashes right into the dream.
The treatment costs approximately $900 to $1,000 every single month.
Which in the late 90s in Argentina was an absolute fortune.
It was an astronomical sum, especially for a factory manager and a part-time cleaner.
Right.
And here is the real tragedy of the situation. The local clubs, including Newell's Old Boys and even River Plate, who were very interested in him, they knew he was a genius. They saw him play. They knew what he could do with a ball.
But they wouldn't pay.
When it came time to actually commit to paying that $1,000 a month, they balked. They backed out.
Wait, hold on. River Plate is a massive, wealthy club. Why wouldn't they pay $1,000 a month for a generational talent? That just seems like terrible business in hindsight.
You have to look at the macro context. As the source notes, Argentina was heading toward a massive economic collapse in the late 90s and early 2000s. Cash was incredibly tight everywhere. And from a club director's perspective, paying that much money every month for an 11-year-old is a massive gamble.
Because there are no guarantees.
Right. What if the treatment doesn't work? What if he gets a knee injury at 14 and never plays again? It's a very high-risk financial investment on a child.
So talent wasn't enough. That is the scary part for anyone listening. You can literally be the best in the world at your craft, but if you can't pay the medical bill, you just fall through the cracks.
He almost vanished from history right there. The pure talent was there, but the support system in Argentina completely failed him. He needed an intervention from outside.
And that intervention came from a very unexpected place. It didn't come from Rosario or Buenos Aires. It came from across the ocean.
Enter FC Barcelona. Or, more specifically, a man named Carlos Rexach, the sporting director of FC Barcelona.
This is the turning point of the whole story. The family leverages some contacts. They manage to get him a trial over in Barcelona. They fly over the Atlantic.
And Rexach watches him play for maybe 5 minutes. And he just knows. He knows this kid is entirely different from anyone else.
But the board of directors at Barcelona, they weren't so sure, were they?
No, not at all. They were very hesitant. You have to remember, it was practically unheard of to sign a 13-year-old from South America back then. It meant moving his entire family across the world, finding jobs for the parents, getting them a house, and of course, committing to paying those hefty medical bills. It was a logistical and financial nightmare for the club.
And this hesitation leads to one of my absolute favorite anecdotes in all of sports history, the napkin.
The famous napkin contract.
Tell us exactly how that happened.
So, Jorge Messi, the father, is getting understandably anxious. They've been sitting in Barcelona, waiting and waiting for a formal decision from the club. He finally tells Rexach, look, if you don't sign him right now, we're leaving. We're packing up and going back to Argentina.
A bluff. Or maybe he meant it, but it worked.
Rexach is terrified of losing this once-in-a-lifetime talent. He's at a tennis club having lunch with some agents. He asks the waiter for a piece of paper so he can write something down, but they don't have any paper handy. So he grabs a standard paper napkin off the table.
A paper napkin? A literal restaurant napkin?
And on that napkin, he physically writes out a contract. He writes, I, Charlie Rexach, in my capacity as technical secretary for FC Barcelona, commit to signing Lionel Messi as long as the conditions are met. He signed it, the agents present signed it, and that little napkin is what saved Messi's entire career.
That is just insane. A billion-dollar history-making career was salvaged on a disposable napkin because one guy was desperate not to let him walk out the door.
But the catch was still there, the big condition. Barcelona promised to pay all the medical bills, but the condition was that Messi and his family had to move to Spain permanently.
I really want you, the listener, to just sit with that for a second. You are a working-class family. You have to quit your stable job at the steel factory. You have to say goodbye to your grandparents, your cousins, your friends. You have to move to a country where, yes, they speak Spanish, but the culture is totally different. The people are different, all for a maybe.
It was an immense gamble. And the reality is, it split the family for a while. Eventually, his mother and his siblings moved back to Rosario because they were deeply unhappy in Spain. They missed home. So Lionel stayed in Spain alone with his father.
Wow, imagine the loneliness of that.
You are 13 years old. You are still dealing with daily hormone injections. Your mom and your siblings are 6,000 miles away. And you have to perform on the pitch every single day just to justify the immense expense the club is putting into you.
It really emphasizes that his success was not inevitable, not at all. It was the direct result of a massive, terrifying risk taken by his parents. If they say no, if they're simply too scared to move across the world, we never hear the name Lionel Messi.
Exactly. That decision to accept the deal and enroll him in Barcelona's youth academy fundamentally changed the history of the sport.
So the deal is struck. He's enrolled in La Masia, the famous Barcelona youth academy. We are in the year 2000 now.
And this begins the rise. But it wasn't instant flashy stardom. He was actually very quiet. The biography mentions that his teammates thought he was mute at first because he simply never spoke in the locker room. He just played.
He let the feet do the talking, quite literally.
Exactly. He was steadily climbing the ladder through the junior system ranks. He moved through Infantil B, Cadet A. He was tearing through the youth leagues. He was getting his medical treatment, so he was finally growing physically, and he was developing technically, absorbing the very specific, highly tactical Barcelona style of play.
Which brings us to the real breakout, Section 3, the rise at Barcelona. We are in 2005.
May 1st, 2005 to be exact. That is the date of his first official senior goal. He comes on as a late substitute in a La Liga match against Albacete.
And who provides the assist for that first goal? This is a great trivia fact.
Ronaldinho. And that is incredibly poetic. Ronaldinho was the undisputed king of Barcelona at that time. He was the best player in the entire world, playing with a smile on his face. He essentially took young Messi under his wing. He saw the talent in training. For that first goal, Ronaldinho scoops the ball beautifully over the defense, and Messi, this tiny teenager with a floppy haircut, just lobs it over the goalkeeper.
The source notes the historical significance here. With that lob, he became the youngest player to ever score in a La Liga game for Barcelona at that time.
It validated everything. It validated the napkin, the cross-ocean move, the daily injections, the family separation. 5 years after the club started paying for the medical treatment, they suddenly have the youngest goal scorer in their storied history. But there was another bureaucratic hurdle they had to cross, which was citizenship.
Right, the source explicitly mentions he received Spanish citizenship in September of 2005. Why was that administrative detail so important for his career trajectory?
Well, in European leagues, and specifically La Liga, you are only allowed a maximum of 3 non-EU, or non-European Union, players on your matchday squad. Barcelona had plenty of Brazilians and other international stars at the time. Messi, as an Argentine, was occupying one of those highly valuable non-EU slots.
Ah, I see.
By getting a Spanish citizenship in September, he officially became a European player on paper. It freed up a non-EU slot for the club to sign someone else, and it completely solidified his status within the team. He wasn't a temporary guest anymore. He was fully integrated.
And the stats from that early period start to trickle in. The source says in 17 league appearances, he managed to strike 6 goals.
Which is a very solid return for a teenager who is mostly playing out on the wing rather than as a central striker.
It's good. But looking back from where we sit now, those numbers, 6 goals, they just seem so human.
They are just the spark before the fire. At this stage, he's a promising young player. He is exciting, he is a fantastic dribbler, but he isn't the relentless goal-scoring machine we know today.
But the comparisons started early anyway, and they were incredibly heavy comparisons. This brings us to Section 4, the Maradona era.
Yes, the media label Maradona.
The source material says his action for scoring goals was seen as way too similar to Diego Maradona.
We really have to take a moment to understand the immense weight of that specific comparison. In Argentina, Diego Maradona isn't just a great former player, he is practically a deity. He won the 1986 World Cup almost single-handedly. He represents the passionate soul of the entire country. To be a young Argentine player and be compared to Maradona is the ultimate compliment, but is also a crushing, suffocating burden.
It's the expectation that comes with it, right? Because if you are crowned the new Maradona, you aren't allowed to just be a good player. You have to be a god on the pitch. You have to win the World Cup for your country.
Precisely. And the thing is, Messi actually made it incredibly hard for the media to ignore the comparison because he literally replicated Maradona's most famous goals on the pitch. For example, in 2007, against a team called Getafe, Messi scored a goal that was almost a frame-by-frame reenactment of Maradona's famous goal of the century against England in 1986.
Oh man, I remember watching that.
He picked up the ball at the exact same spot near the halfway line, dribbled past 5 different players, went around the goalkeeper, and scored.
It was uncanny. It was genuinely like he was channeling a ghost.
And that completely cemented the narrative. After that goal, he wasn't just the top prospect anymore, he was the chosen one.
But let's look at the stats as he matures. February 27, 2007, he plays his 100th match for Barcelona against Valencia.
And in that particular season, he scores 16 goals and gets 13 assists. So he's really becoming a dual threat now. He's scoring and creating for others. But tactically, he is still playing somewhat of a traditional winger role. He stays out wide on the right, he cuts inside on his left foot.
But 2009, that is the year where the massive transition happens. This is the real breakthrough.
The successful year, as the source calls it. But if we look closely at the tactics, this is the year of the revolution. A new coach had arrived at Barcelona, Pep Guardiola.
And this is where our deep dive gets really deep, because Guardiola completely changed Messi's position on the field, didn't he?
He did. He moved him from the right wing into the center of the pitch, but not as a traditional big, strong striker. He created the role of the false 9.
Explain that for the listener who might not be a tactical nerd. What exactly is a false 9?
So traditionally, a number 9, the main striker, stays right up against the opposition's central defenders, waiting for the ball to be crossed or passed to them. Guardiola told Messi to start in that high position, but then as a play developed, to drop deep backwards into the midfield area.
So he essentially walks away from the goal.
Exactly. And this completely confuses the central defenders. They have a dilemma. Do they follow him all the way into the midfield, which leaves a massive gap in the defense behind them for other players to run into? Or do they stay back in their position and let Messi turn with the ball, face them, and run at them with full speed? It essentially broke the traditional geometry of the game.
And the results of that tactical shift were just devastating.
Unbelievable results. He wins his first Copa del Rey that year. He helps the team win the historic treble, which is La Liga, the Copa del Rey, and the UEFA Champions League, all in one season. And the individual stats completely explode. He ends that season with 38 goals and 18 assists.
38 goals. That is the exact moment he officially stops being a great winger and becomes the world dominator.
And consequently, he wins his first Ballon d'Or, which is the award for the best player in the world.
So we are fully in the golden years now. 2010 comes around, and according to the notes, this is the year of hat tricks.
He became the very first Barcelona player to score back-to-back hat tricks in La Liga.
Back-to-back hat tricks, that's 6 goals in 2 games. The consistency is frightening.
It signals a level of focus that is incredibly rare, and his total tally for 2010 across all competitions: 47 goals and 11 assists.
47 goals. Let's trace that line. We've gone from 6 to 16 to 38 to 47. The trajectory is just pointing straight up.
And we also see the clear emergence of the great rivalry here. The source specifically notes that in the 2010 Copa del Rey, Messi was the joint top scorer with 7 goals, completely tied with Cristiano Ronaldo.
Right. We can't tell the story of Messi without mentioning Ronaldo. They pushed each other to absolutely insane heights, didn't they?
Absolutely. It was a statistical arms race.
Yeah.
If Ronaldo scored 2 goals on a Saturday, Messi felt he absolutely had to score 3 on Sunday. They completely normalized greatness. Numbers that would have won you the Golden Boot in any other historical era were just considered an average season for these two.
The pace just doesn't stop. In the 2010 to 2011 season, he finishes with 53 goals and 24 assists.
And then in 2011 to 2012, he officially becomes the leading goal scorer for Barcelona in all official competitions. He is literally rewriting a century-old club's history books in real time. He is passing guys like Cesar Rodriguez, who played way back in the 1950s.
And there was that Champions League record, too. The source points out he was the first player to ever score 5 goals in a single UEFA Champions League match. 5. Against Bayer Leverkusen.
I remember watching that game live. It was surgical. There were chips, lobs, powerful driven shots. It showed his complete, full repertoire. Most professional players dream of scoring 5 goals in their entire Champions League career. He did it in 90 minutes.
But incredibly, all of these insane numbers and records we've just listed, they are basically just a warm-up for the main event. The 2012 calendar year.
This is the core of our deep dive.
The number is 91.
91 goals.
I genuinely need to take a breath just saying it out loud. 91 goals in a calendar year. That means from January 1st to December 31st.
It is the official Guinness World Record. It beat the legendary German striker Gerd Müller's previous record of 85 goals from back in 1972.
I want to challenge this for a second. How is that even physically possible? Was the defense in Spain just terrible that year? Or was Barcelona doing something tactically that funneled every single ball directly to his feet?
It was a perfect storm, a combination of several factors. Tactically, yes, the team was entirely built around his movements, but physically, this is where we circle all the way back to the growth hormone treatment and the specific body type he developed. Because of his incredibly low center of gravity, he can decelerate faster than almost any defender in the world.
What does that mean practically on the pitch, decelerate?
It means stopping. Think about physics. A defender who is 6'2" running at full speed takes 3 or 4 heavy steps just to slow down and stop. Messi, because of his build, takes 1 step, so he runs fast, stops instantly. The defender physically cannot stop and flies right past him, and suddenly Messi has 3 yards of open space in the penalty box. In 2012, he had perfected this specific physical mechanic. He wasn't running more miles than anyone else. He was moving far more efficiently.
And he played almost every single game, right? He never rested.
That's the crucial durability factor.
Yeah.
To score 91 goals in 365 days, you cannot be injured. You can't even have a bad ankle sprain. You have to play the easy league games, the hard Champions League games, the cup games, the international friendlies. He was absolutely relentless. It requires a mental focus that is exhausting to even think about. Imagine scoring a hat-trick, waking up the next day and being genuinely angry that you didn't score 4. That was his mindset in 2012.
So 91 goals. Doing the math, that's essentially a goal every 4 days for an entire calendar year.
And the source mentions the immediate result of this feat. Barcelona renewed his contract specifically due to this, quote, supremely outstanding performance.
Well, I should certainly hope so. If an employee delivers 91 goals, you slide a blank check across the desk and give them whatever they want.
Precisely. He had become bigger than the club in some respects.
But, of course, nothing lasts forever in terms of smooth sailing. The human body has limits. The narrative takes a tough turn after 2012. We get into Section 6, the resilience phase.
Yes. Resilience, injury, and the international struggle.
The source mentions persistent injuries leading up to 2014.
This is always the scary part for an elite athlete.
Yeah.
You hit the absolute peak of human performance, 91 goals, and then the body starts to say, hey, wait a minute, we can't keep doing this. The hamstrings, the calf muscles, they start to fray under the immense load of playing 70 games a year.
It posed a genuine threat to his career. We saw a noticeable dip in his output.
But he bounces back. He adapts. The 2014 to 2015 season is the great comeback. This is the era of the famous MSN forward line, Messi, Suarez, Neymar.
Oh, that trio was just unbelievably fun to watch. Pure entertainment.
Because he reinvented himself yet again, he became slightly more of a creator, dropping even deeper, but still remained a lethal scorer. The source notes he scored a hat-trick against Sevilla in November 2014 to become the all-time top scorer in La Liga history.
He just collects historic records like they are cheap trading cards.
And in that 2015 season, he scored 58 of the team's 122 total goals.
Almost half the team's entire offensive production came from his boots.
That just shows the sheer dependency the team still had on him, even with Suarez and Neymar there.
However, while the club career was soaring back to the stratosphere, there was a very different, much darker story playing out on the international stage. And this is really where the emotional core of his biography lies: the national team heartbreak.
This is the tragedy hidden within the triumph. While he was treated as a literal god in Barcelona, he was struggling immensely to bring a major trophy home to Argentina.
And it all violently culminates in 2016, the Copa America Centenario final against Chile.
They go to a penalty shootout, and Messi misses his penalty.
I remember the image of him after that game so vividly. Him crying on the pitch, looking completely, utterly broken.
And the fallout from that miss was immediate and highly dramatic. On June 26, 2016, Messi announced his formal retirement from international football.
He just quit, just walked away from the national team.
He spoke to the press in the mix zone and said, "It's not for me. I tried my hardest. It hurts me more than anyone, but it's evident that this is not for me."
That is so heavy. Think about that. This is the undisputed best player in the world, a guy who scored 91 goals in a year, standing at a microphone saying, "I am not good enough for my country."
Because it wasn't about technical skill anymore. It was entirely about the psychological burden, that Macedonia weight we talked about earlier. He had lost 3 major tournament finals in 3 consecutive years. The World Cup in 2014, the Copa America in 2015, and the Copa America in 2016. It was sporting trauma.
It makes him so much more human, doesn't it? We look at the 91 goals and the Ballon d'Or and we think he's a robot programmed to play football, but here he is weeping on the pitch, essentially giving up under the pressure.
He did give up, momentarily. But this is exactly where the story of resilience comes rushing back. Immediately following his retirement announcement, a massive organic campaign began across Argentina. It was called No Te Vayas Leo, Don't Go Leo.
The people finally realized what they were losing.
It was a national movement. Even the president of Argentina personally called him on the phone. They unveiled statues of him in Buenos Aires. The country collectively realized they had been way too harsh on him. They had demanded too much.
And the campaign worked.
It did. On August 12, 2016, he officially announced he would reverse his decision. He declared he would return to lead the campaign for the 2018 World Cup.
That's a massive moment of personal growth. To swallow your pride, to face the very real fear of going back and losing a 4th final, and to step back into the arena anyway.
It shows that the fight he always talks about isn't just physical endurance, it's deeply emotional. It's about facing repeated public failure and saying, okay, one more time.
Before we get to the man behind all the stats, we absolutely have to acknowledge the trophy case as outlined in the source. It gives us a laundry list here, and it is staggering to read in one go.
Let's run through it, but let's make sure we contextualize what these awards actually mean.
Okay, Ballon d'Or wins 5 times up to the point discussed in this section: 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2015.
That means for nearly an entire decade, he was voted by journalists and peers as the single best player on earth more often than not.
The European Golden Shoe 4 times by 2017.
Which means he was the top goal scorer, not just in Spain, but across all leagues in all of Europe.
The FIFA Club World Cup Golden Ball twice. 2009 and 2011.
It creates a sense of just overwhelming, suffocating success. But I think it's really important to pivot now to Section 8, the man behind the stats. Who actually is this guy when he takes off the boots and goes home?
Well, the biography is quite interesting on this front. Despite the unimaginable global fame, his personal life seems to circle right back to his roots in Rosario. He's not out there living a wild tabloid lifestyle going to Hollywood parties.
No, quite the opposite. He married Antonela Roccuzzo on June 30th, 2017.
And for those who don't know, who is Antonella? Is she an international supermodel? An actress?
No, she's the cousin of his childhood best friend. He has known her since he was 5 years old, growing up in Rosario.
That is incredible. He becomes the most famous and wealthy man on the planet. He could be with anyone, and he marries the girl from his childhood neighborhood.
And look at the specific wedding details the source provides. They didn't do it in Paris or a castle in Barcelona or on some private island in the Caribbean.
Right, they did it at a hotel in Rosario.
The Hotel City Center. It's a luxury hotel, yes, but it's situated right near the working class neighborhood where he grew up. He invited 260 guests. It was a complete return to where it all started. It suggests a very strong, grounded connection to his original identity. He never really stopped being the kid from Rosario.
And the family grew. The source lists 3 sons, Tiago, born in 2012, Mateo in 2015, and Ciro in 2018.
So he is actively balancing this highly pressurized, insane career with being a father of 3 young boys. And by all accounts, he's a very present father. You see him taking them to practice, picking them up from school. It's a remarkably normal domestic life wrapped inside a completely abnormal career.
And he's also looking outward using his platform. Let's talk about the philanthropy.
This is where I think the childhood trauma we discussed earlier seems to directly transform into action. In 2007, relatively early in his fame, he established the Lionel Messi Foundation.
And what specifically does that foundation focus on?
It explicitly focuses on access to education and healthcare for vulnerable children.
Wow. Healthcare access, that hits incredibly close to home.
It does. If we connect this to the bigger picture of his life, remember his own origin story. He was a highly vulnerable child who desperately needed specialized healthcare access, specifically the $1,000 a month growth hormone treatment, just to survive and thrive. He knows exactly firsthand what happens when families simply can't pay the medical bills.
So in a way, he is trying to be that sporting director with a napkin for other kids, paying the bills so they can at least have a fighting chance.
Exactly. He's also been a goodwill ambassador for UNICEF since 2010. It's a very consistent theme of giving back to alleviate the specific types of struggles he himself had to overcome.
It really ties the whole narrative together perfectly. It's not just an arrogant attitude of, well, I got mine. It's a very humble, I remember exactly how hard it was when no one would pay for my medicine.
It is a very grounded perspective.
So let's wrap this deep dive up. We have unpacked the entire trajectory of Lionel Messi's life, from the tiny boy in Rosario with a debilitating growth hormone deficiency, all the way to the man scoring an impossible 91 goals in a single year and holding up 5 Ballon d'Or.
It is a journey defined by one core philosophy, and the source actually gives us a direct quote from Messi that sums it up. You have to fight to reach your dream. You have to sacrifice and work hard for it.
Simple words. Almost a sports cliche, really. But when you look at what he actually sacrificed, leaving his country at 13, enduring the painful daily injections, facing the crushing pressure of being labeled Macedonia, suffering through the heartbreaking final losses with Argentina, you realize he genuinely lived every single one of those words. He paid a massive personal price for the magic we see on the pitch.
He truly did.
Yeah.
The magic wasn't free. It was bought with resilience.
So here is my final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. We spent this time talking about his undisputed genius. We talked about his relentless hard work. But I want your mind to go all the way back to that pivotal moment at age 11. The paper napkin at the tennis club. The $1,000 a month?
A necessary intervention.
If that sporting director, Carl Rexach, doesn't ask the waiter for that napkin and sign it, if the Barcelona board decides it's just too much trouble and expense to bring a 13-year-old over, does Lionel Messi exist?
It raises a very important and frankly uncomfortable question. How much sheer human genius is lost to history simply because there was no one there to pay the bill? How many other potential Messis are out there right now, sitting in Rosario or Rio or Lagos, waiting for just a little bit of institutional support to overcome a medical or financial hurdle?
Support matters, even for the greatest of all time. No one, absolutely no one, does it entirely alone.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.